other people's money. About how parts of, as Rowan Dean would like to say, the deep state and others, well, frankly, they piddle it up against the wall, and if you call them out on it, well, people get annoyed. Have a look at this. Ratepayers in Queensland, in Brisbane, have forked out $14,000 since March of 2016 in cab fares for LNP committee and council chairs to travel around Brisbane. This was despite each councillor having access to a car under Brisbane City Council's fleet acquisition program. Now, the biggest spender was the former chair of council, Angela Owen. She banged out about $6,000, $5,771.61, just in case the lawyers are watching. The current deputy mayor racked up $3,241 when it comes to other people's money and taxi fares. Oh, there's more from this pot to talk about. The one-term wonder, and even then kind of quarter-term wonder, that was Kerryn Phelps. What about this story today? Former independent MP Kerryn Phelps has been criticised for failing the pub test on politicians' spending after racking up $1,400 in a single day of travel around Sydney in a Commonwealth car. She was a member for one bit of the eastern suburbs. $1,600? Ms Phelps, who of course was unsuccessful in her re-election bid, spent $6,187 on Comcar visits between February 26 and May 8, according to numbers that came out today. There's another story, and I'll get to that in a second, but Rita, once they just get that little whiff that somebody else is paying for it, they just take the proverbial, don't they? They'll all say it's defensible, but it's not.
$1,400 in one day is quite impressive, I've got to say, especially when you're talking about Sydney. It wasn't like she was going around the country areas or remote areas. She's in an area where it's well serviced by taxis, by public transport, and let's not forget she's a big greenie, so why she got a Comcar on standby for her for, what, over $1,400 for one day? It is utterly absurd. Of course it doesn't pass the pub test. And she's also got access to other vehicles as well, as you mentioned, with a councillor. So the Comcars are only supposed to be used when there are no other options that are available to you. And I would suggest that in Sydney there are always better options, cheaper options. Probably not better for Kerryn, but better for the taxpayer. But then what about $14,000 in taxi fares, Corey? Honestly, like, these people, they just take the piss. And if you call them out, then, oh, you're part of the problem. And then this is why the media watch things happen, because once you poke the bear as many times as we do, that's how they get you back, is they'll eventually all dob to the boss, and then the boss will eventually point at you and everyone giggles. Do I give a stuff?
Yeah, Paul, the extraordinary thing about those two stories you mentioned was, firstly, in the case of the councillors, they've now passed a rule saying you're only allowed to use taxis for official business. So for 20-odd years, you could use a taxi for whatever you liked. You could just clock it up on your cab charge and it was paid for without any question. So why is it that you have to get sunlight on and public exposure to embarrass people into doing the right thing? And I would say the same about Kerryn Phelps. The unwritten rule for Commonwealth parliamentarians has been that you don't use Comcar in your home state except to go to and from the airport, and you use your private vehicle or you pay for your taxi or your Uber yourself. But interstate, when you're on official business, you can use it both for security purposes or for regular transport purposes. Now, New South Wales is not a foreign state for Wentworth. It might be a different part of the world from the members for Wentworth who are, detached from reality, but there's no way in the world that she should justify a 12-hour usage of a Comcar during an election campaign. No, it's almost like the people knew that somebody instinctively knew how somebody was representing them and enjoying, the flights up the front, the free cars, because that seemed to correct itself with the election just gone. Michael, I want to ask you as well about a decision the Prime Minister has made, which I think is a good one, which is it's time to know who is duchessing the public service. Because when we talk about the deep state, when we talk about the people who will drag their feet to hopefully outlive a minister or a Prime Minister or a Conservative government, we need to know who's in their ear
Who are the ones giving them gifts and presents? Have a look at this. Secret registers detailing how bureaucrats have been wined and dined by big business will now be made public after the Prime Minister personally intervened following a News Corp special investigation. It comes after Federal Health Department went to extraordinary lengths to hide the showering of top executive with gifts, including a $1,000 gift voucher to David Jones, business class flights to overseas conferences, bottles of wine and tickets to sporting events. Hallelujah, but how the hell did this take till 2019 to know how these people are being won over?
Well, mate, I couldn't agree more. I must say I'm very surprised to learn that gifts of this magnitude are being given to any public servant. Why would that be the case? So I think the Prime Minister's made the right move here. If this is happening and people are getting $1,000 vouchers, OK, maybe it's a one-off, but that's most unusual behaviour, is it? Why would anyone in business be giving that to a public servant? OK, no objection to them having lunch, dinner, whatever. No objection to that being revealed. And certainly no objection whatsoever to any details of these gifts being publicised. As we know, all parliamentarians have to declare whatever gifts they get. I think, Corey, it's over, is it $300 or somewhere around $300 you have to declare it?
But also, it is this thing too, Corey, where the truth is that for all of the scrutiny and all of the talk about MPs travel and whether it passes the pub test or not, could someone somewhere start to have a chat about a public servant's travel? So the Prime Minister in this country gets paid $500,000. The phalanx of people who run the departments who should be taking orders from the Prime Minister are all paid way over what the Prime Minister does, but they basically get MP level access to all of the flights, lounges and all the rest of it. And certainly, depending on whether you're flying Sydney, Melbourne out of Canberra after sitting days, there's the good plane and the bad plane, and they also happen to be only ever flying on standby on the good plane, not the bad plane.
Yeah, it's a funny coincidence, isn't it? The only way you're going to overcome this is to adopt what a group called the Australian Taxpayers Alliance have come up with. It's modelled on the American system. It is a transparency portal. Basically, you report every bit of expenditure for departments. You record all of this stuff for politicians. It's all available online in a searchable database within 24 hours, and you watch the cockroaches scurry under the fridge as soon as you put the light on, because you will soon find that the lavish expenses of public servants, some public departments, would outrage the Australian people, and we need to highlight more of it.
But Rita, there's a shakedown that happens here, you see, is that if you call out the public service on this sort of stuff, they go slow. I mean, hence why the Prime Minister had to be re-elected, get as many of the bosses into the Great Hall as possible and remind them who the hell they're working for. But if you started to do exactly what Corey just did, suddenly that proposal you've got, Minister, it's going to take 8 to 10 business days for me to be able to produce it from this drawer in my desk to my desk.
Well, yes, it's all a bit little yes minister, isn't it, where the bureaucracy pretty much runs the show, and you've got the politicians who come and go, but it's really the bureaucracy who's in charge. But some of those gifts you mentioned, I'm absolutely blown away. I mean, you're talking about business class airfares overseas, that's worth thousands and thousands of dollars. So really, you do wonder what benefit businesses are getting in providing that to a public servant, what they're getting in return. And it's incredible that it's taken this long for this discussion to even be had.